Hi, I'm Brett Parker, Multimedia Specialist for National Multimedia Specialist for National Provisioner Magazine. And today we're highlighting U.S. pork exports, which according to economic reports have hit a record high in 2024. Here to discuss this with us is Dan Halstrom, President and CEO of U.S. Meat Export Federation. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Brett.
Now, pork exports have experienced a record year in 2024. Do you have any theories that could explain their international popularity?
Yeah, I think there's several, Brett. Number one, and probably one of the excuse me, one of the key points is that pork culturally over the decades and centuries, pork culturally is one of the most accepted proteins in the world. And I kind of look at countries like Mexico, China, Central America, where pork is part of the culture. It's part of the day-to-day meal preferences, right? I think that's one issue. Another issue with pork globally is the versatility in preparation and usages. I mean, a lot of times you'll have a wide variance. It's the center of the plate for retail and for food service, but yet it's also an ingredient for further processed meats like deli products in the deli, or they could be an ingredient for further processed products like sausages. So I think the overall nuance of pork is that depending on the culture, there could be five or six different ways of using. I think the other thing too is you know the pork culturally being so accepted, people are used to it, right? So, the key, I think, there's a lot of keys, but one of the keys is proper preparation. And there's a tendency in places like Mexico, for example, to really overcook pork. And if you can cook it to medium or medium rare, very rarely do you have a bad eating experience. But if you cook it to well done, as we all know, that's a different outcome. So I think there's a lot of things, though, that contribute to the popularity of pork globally.
Do you feel America does something specifically different with their meat exports that other countries do not?
Well, I think the U.S. has an advantage in a lot of sectors. Number one, the overarching advantage that the U.S. production system has, and this doesn't apply only to pork, but with beef and poultry, et cetera, is our food safety inspection system has the gold star reputation in the world for safety, right? Number one is safety, producing products. We have large volumes of production, but with the caveat that safety comes first, right? So when you see pork in a USDA establishment box around the world, that means something. So that's issue one, is our reputation and our leadership globally in the area of food safety. I think there's a lot of other things that underlie that, though, that add to it. Number one is, I think, genetics. Genetics continue to improve, to get better. We had a long time there where we spent decades taking fat out of our pork, right? That lean trend back in the 80s and 90s, where you want to get rid of that surface fat, but at the same time, you got rid of the intramuscular fat. Now we're seeing a trend back towards not so much focusing, we don't want that surface fat, but we do want more intramuscular fat. So there's a little bit of a pendulum swinging back for more intramuscular fat. And the purpose of that is for better taste or improved taste. I think also you look at the breeding side of things. We're at a record pace right now for saved pigs per litter in 2024. So that adds to our efficiency. So I think there's a lot of things involved in this discussion, and a lot of other countries. Some of them do similar things, but I think if you add it all up and package it, the U.S. really stands out in general.
Now, economic reports can either swing up or down. Do you feel American meat exports that their numbers are consistently positive or consistently negative over time?
Well, I think I've been involved in this business now. This is going in my 41st year, and most of it's been involved in international. And I remember when the international markets in the early 80s were brand new and we're sending sample boxes out. And now we're at over 8 billion in exports. So I think the overall trend is very positive and has a good trend outlook going forward. I think there's several things that contribute to that. We have the top 5 or 6 markets that we all know about. You got your Mexico, Hong Kong, China, Canada, Japan, Korea, and more recently, the Central American region of your top 6 regions. But I'm excited about the other bucket. I mean, I'm excited about those markets that we just talked about. Mexico setting amazing records. But if you look at some of the other markets around the world that show potential going forward, Colombia, Chile, the Caribbean region, Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia is a relatively new region here in the last few years that's seeing significant growth. And I think these are all examples, strategically, the market is trying to diversify and expand so that we're not over reliant on 5 or 6 regions. So if we can get 10 or 12 regions that become significant, the U.S. will be even that more well positioned for growth. And I think, as you know, the percentage of our production that's being exported is slowly climbing over time. We're up well over 30%. We had one month, I believe, when you add pork and pork variety meats together, we were almost 34% of the production. So basically, one of every 3 hogs on a weight basis has been exported. So, generally, I would say there's up and down years, of course, but generally, I think we're well positioned to see continued growth in this area.
Do you feel meat processors could be doing something to improve meat export numbers over time?
Well, yeah, we get that question a lot. And I was a former processor for many years when first half of my career. And I think they have been extremely resilient in responding to the markets. But I would say the market demands. But I would say, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, you've seen a real effort to adjust to the demands of the market. Now, it has to work both ways, right? I mean, I think that the demands have to be realistic because a lot of times certain specifications are wanted and the cost to produce is quite a bit more. Well, the processors are only going to do it if the economics make sense. In the same way with the customers. The customers will only do it if the economics make sense for them. But I think in general, especially considering the size of our industry, the processors and packers have been extremely resilient in responding to the demands of the market. And one of the trends that we've really seen in the last let's say the last 5 or 6 years has been this global increase in global demand for convenience. Smaller packaging. Places like Korea, for example, they're wanting not necessarily that we pack the smaller packages here. It might be repackaged in Korea, for example, but that's a demand curve that's really booming. And convenience stores, traditional convenience stores as we would know it, is one demand factor, but even modern retail, you're seeing more and more of the meal kits, more and more of the home meal replacement SKUs. They're becoming prevalent in places like Korea, Japan, to some extent, even Mexico. And I think our processors, packers have really taken this on and adapted their specifications to meet the needs of some of these demand trends. So yes, without it, I mean, are they able to do everything? No. I mean, there's a shortage of labor. The very labor-intensive things are increasingly difficult. But on the other hand, the plants are becoming more and more adept at technology, robotics, et cetera. So it doesn't ever seem to catch up. I mean, it's always, but you compare it to 5 or 10 years ago, the changes for the better in these plants has been amazing.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Dan Halstrom of the U.S. Meat Export Federation, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Brett. Thank you.
And thank you all for watching.